Welcome to READ, the Research, Education, and Advocacy podcast. READ connects you with researchers, educators, and thought leaders on topics in education and child development. READ is produced by the Windward Institute. I'm so excited. This is another special episode of Lead on READ, co-hosted by me, Dr. Danielle Gomez, and my co-host extraordinaire, best friend, podcast buddy, co-host, head of school of the Windward School, and executive director of the Institute, Jamie Williamson.
Thank you. I feel the same. I do love and enjoy. This is one of my favorite things that I get to do a couple times a year. So I really, really enjoy it. So I also want to take a moment to remind our readers that Lead on READ is where we get to highlight critical issues and questions around leadership and education. We get to share an interest in change management, talk about scaling to change to build more equitable schools and communities. And would you like to do the reveal on who our special guest is today?
I'm really excited, but I think we're both really excited. So I'm going to give you the honors on this.
I so appreciate that. Just want to make sure that if you want to, I don't want to steal any thunder,
I want to do it at the same time, but
yeah. I know for sure we're coordinated today on that one. So we are very, very excited to talk with Kareem Weaver today. So who's done some incredible work, and I know he's done a lot of podcasts. He's got a great film out in the world, and I'm really excited to sit down and have a little conversation with him about building some scalable change in communities. So
yeah, me too. And what's really great about this episode, it is Dyslexia Awareness Month. The Windward Institute, the Windward School, us as leaders in this space are committed to advocating for people with dyslexia, as well as underscoring the importance of literacy as a fundamental right. I mean, literacy makes us successful in every aspect of our life. And just to add, I think some of the things about Kareem that I really like, he is a leader in leading literacy change as a vehicle for transforming equity. He's a steadfast advocate for children in vulnerable populations. He is knowledgeable. He has the expertise in driving systemic change, impactful reform in schools and communities. And I think in addition to his work as Right to Read, I think I really want to underscore some of these pieces as his work as an NAACP activist, as well as some of his work in Oakland.
Yeah. There's a few folks we get to talk to along the way who are putting up some incredible conversations about change and leadership in their space. But I do think Kareem is one of those folks who have walked the walk. Mm-hmm. He's been in the old proverbial trenches doing this work in classrooms, leading a school building as a principal myself for a number of years. I know the challenges that leading at that sort of level is. And then watching him and seeing how he sort of translated that passion and energy into a much larger sort of national platform. It's just been really exciting to see. So
yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much we're about to learn together. All right, leaders on readers, or just our readers. Welcome to this lead episode, and we'll see you after the episode. Kareem Weaver, welcome to the READ podcast. It's so nice to have you on for this episode.
I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you for having me.
No, so glad you're here today.
We're so inspired by your work, and we know how you have been a leader for a long time in this space. Before we get into some of our juicy questions and hear your insights, we always like to start all of our READ podcast conversations with where are you in the world? I see you have a beautiful Golden Gate Bridge behind you. We know that you live out on the West Coast. We're East Coasters here, but we want to know where you are in the world and how you're showing up to this conversation.
I'm in the Bay Area, as you see behind me. I mean, that's a virtual image, but I'm in San Francisco Bay Area and in the East Bay, which would be Oakland, Richmond, Berkeley, places like that. So this is home for me. I was born and raised out here. So I'm coming to this work, to this podcast this morning, really for the first time, being home for the first time in a few weeks, and seeing what's going on around the country in places like Maryland and Hawaii and other places. Yeah. We're trying to get this right. So it's good to be here because social justice really does start at home.
Yeah, agreed.
I love that. And I think we definitely want to hear some of the things that you're continuing to observe and the change that you're trying to make. And before we talk about, I think, literacy and equity, Jamie and I, whenever we approach conversations like this, want to know your story, right? How did you get to this point where you understood that literacy was the fundamental aspect of equity and really just life success, right? And I think too, I'm really curious to know about how you started to see how literacy is this bridge for social justice.
So let's see. I mean, long story short, I just opened my eyes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you don't need a PhD in sociology or anything else to see that this is a root cause issue. You know, I have a master's in clinical community psychology. And I used to always wonder, I got into that because I used to wonder how people in antebellum America could go along with slavery. You can't tell me all the people were bad people. You just can't tell me that.
Yeah.
So why did they just go along with it? And it's that whole thing. It's groupthink. It's us not being willing to question those in authority, wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
It's, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
Yeah.
And frankly, when all the institutions are saying things, your parents are saying it, the church is saying it, the schools are saying it, everything. And so people just go along with it. It's easier to just go along and get along.
Yeah.
And it's not, we always like to think, you know what, if I was alive back then, I wouldn't have done this. I would have done, you know what? Most of the time, yes, we would have.
Yeah.
Because we go along with things today, just like they went along with things back then. The literacy crisis is today, there's a crisis for every generation to wrestle with. It's just, but we're responding in very similar ways. So for me, it was just a matter of recognizing that and being at a point in my life where I was like, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Enough is enough. And it happened. I mean, I taught like my hair was on fire, but as a teacher, you can only do what you got a few kids and you do the best you can as a principal. But I just realized it wasn't, I need to go bigger and get to the root cause of this and just kind of sound the alarm, hoping that people would pay attention. Some are, but we got a long way to go. So that's kind of my journey, starting at local and doing a whole bunch of stuff in between. But now it's just, I'm like the town crier, and I know people get sick of me, but whatever, it is what it is. This is my calling. So the kids can't read. We got to deal with that.
I think there's such a beautiful kind of intersection between leadership and passion. And I think everything you just said kind of resonated so much with me. We have an 8th grade class every year. We graduate about 160 kids from our program. And because we see ourselves as not a to and through, but a real sort of intervention-based model. Kids come to us, they get what they need, and then they go back out in the wild to do the incredible things that they're going to go do in life.
Right.
And I talk about this idea of passion a lot with my 8th graders. This idea that, I think so many kids and so many people, think about passion from this kind of internal space of like, I feel love for this, or I feel affinity towards this, or I really enjoy this, and that's my passion. I would argue those are things that are affinities. But for me, I see passion as like seeing out into the world and seeing where the need in the world is and feeling compelled to fill that need. And when I listen to you just talk about sort of what you were seeing in your classroom, what you were seeing in your community, that feels for me just like the quintessential definition of what passion in action really looks like. And it really spoke to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are passionate about this topic. The question is, are we at a place in our life and our own individual journeys where we decide it's worth it?
Yeah.
Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
Pushing for literacy improvements, you're going to lose friends. You might lose associations. I can tell you, this is not the road to go on if you're looking to become popular.
Yeah.
But man, our kids, it's like, I want to be able to lay my head down at night, you know what I mean? In good conscience. And to not sound the alarm, to not make the investments that we need to individually and organizationally. What does that say about our generation and our commitment to self-interest as opposed to our children? It's almost as if we're the first generation that's more committed to our own interest than the interest of our kids. And that is because how else can it get like this? Nobody else is just completely abdicated unless we say, well, we're just not paying attention. So it's easier to do if you're not paying attention. But if you really wrestle with it, what else can you do? I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to do this, and I took a chance. And sometimes you got to just, when I go, we all going to go. When I go, I want to be able to say I did what I could.
Yeah.
And to the degree possible. And so that's what I'm searching for. And I'm hoping others will at least consider taking that journey. And it may not be, going around the country talking about the kids can't read. It may be, or sharing practices. It may be how we approach our lesson plans. It may be how we approach our curriculum adoption committee. It may be how we approach our preparation schedule when we're advocating from the labor perspective. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do from where we are: policy, implementation, advocacy. Everybody's got a role to play. It could just be sending an email to a board member, say, I want you to focus on literacy. Put that on the agenda every time, a standing item. There's opportunity for us all to do things to move this ball forward.
Yeah.
I so appreciate that. I think the way you're framing some of these pieces, and just to kind of be clear, you have an ally in us here. So we will never get tired of hearing you say these things. We will never get tired of the push here. We will never get tired of hearing you be a champion for children across our great country. But I do think there is so much in what you just said that I think echoes and resonates. We're in a space and time where self-interest often fuels so much of the conversation. And we're really good at expressing concern and outrage sometimes, but we're so not good at standing up and actually having a committed plan forward. And I think that's where we can, we get in front of folks all the time. It's like, but what can I do for the reading challenges in the country? What can I do? And I do think that we have some real space that we stand on, that we get a chance to take some real action. Here at Windward, we see our responsibility, because we are a school where kids come from all over, and we work so hard to make sure we're opening the doors for any kid who needs to be here. But we also want to make sure that we train as many teachers as we can out in the community, that we support local area school districts to be able to do better work. So just again, I think the messages that you bring are so inspiring. I think they are so they're so right for the time right now, because I think we need more of these kind of champions standing up. And so thank you for that.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, I think, Kareem, as you were talking about your experience in the classroom, knowing that you left the classroom to become a principal, now as the co-founder and executive director of Fulcrum, being involved in the Right to Read project, I see all these other these pieces where you're immersed in different aspects of this field, right? And you're seeing literacy affect kids particularly similarly, and also differentially based on where they are, right? And so when I think about this too, from the Windward Institute perspective, as we look in the broader community, I start to see, okay, if I'm looking from my lens as a teacher, maybe the problem is I'm not prepared enough, right? Or if I'm a school leader, or maybe I don't have the resources to have professional development, or maybe I have a lot of teachers that just are ill-equipped. And if I'm a board member, there's all these other things. So my question for you is, as you started to look at the problem of illiteracy, right? And I've heard you say it's a solvable crisis, right?
It is.
Where are perhaps maybe in all these other experiences, can you walk us through perhaps where the problem might manifest, or how it might manifest across all these experiences that you seem to be observing and tackling?
Where the problem might manifest. Sure. Mm-hmm. So the downstream implications of it is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Your attendance. People think they have an attendance crisis. You got a literacy crisis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your behavior issues. You can have all of, restorative justice principles and the mindfulness, all that's wonderful, but that's not dealing with the root cause. The root cause is they're illiterate and they're acting up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You look at teacher turnover. Well, teacher environment or work environment has a lot to do with that turnover and the stress. Mm-hmm. Yes, people want to get paid. They want to be compensated well for their time, et cetera. Teachers go into education to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't do that successfully, you're going to have turnover.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a doctor, for example, you're an emergency room doctor, and you go into work every day and your patients are down on the table, at some point, you're going to be like, man, I'm out of here. What's the point? This is not why I came here. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of teachers make that logical and conscientious choice to step away because they don't see a there there.
Yep.
I see other downstream effects. So communities turn over. Like Oakland is turning over right now because you have, once you sell grandma's house, you can't afford to live there because you can't read and get a job or create a business. And so you just don't have the economic floor. And so literally communities turn over demographically, socially, et cetera. And now it's being gentrified, and now there's the racial division that happens when gentrification happens, not realizing that the root cause of this is illiteracy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why homelessness is, well, I know the Bay Area is kind of unique, but it's coming to a major city near you.
Yeah.
We have people homeless and out of doors all over town, sleeping on almost every park bench, under every bridge.
Yeah.
You literally can't drive down the freeway without seeing somebody there who's out of doors.
Yeah.
And there aren't enough homeless shelters in the world to cover up for a bad literacy program.
Right.
Yep. And New York is no different. Yeah.
New York. Yeah. And so, so these downstream effects, I don't even really like talking about it too much because it hurts the heart so much, but it's the reality of it. And not to get too in the mud here, but the Department of Justice told us in 1993, when they had a report on recidivism, and they basically were asked, what can you do to combat recidivism? They said the first step is teaching children to read. They said, because most of the kids who are in here, so you're talking about youth offenders and how they keep coming back and coming back. They can't read. And they said it's not a correlate. We've determined it's a cause.
Yeah.
Literacy is a cause of delinquent behavior. This is from the department. This is the jails talking.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about downstream effects, like it's nothing nice. The question is, are we really willing to listen? And this is so scathing. In that report, they noted, or they suggested to go around the school districts, and you had to go around the universities because they're saying they don't listen.
Yeah.
It is one of the worst indictments I have ever read. Like if we, the jails, if we want to save these kids, we've got to go around the universities, go around the K-12 system, because they're going to do what they want to do. They're not attending to the research. This is over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
I think hasn't changed.
Yeah, and I think I made a tiny URL that people can check out if I can do it by memory. I think it's tinyurl.com/kidsinprison. Yeah, so you can go there, read it for yourself. Let's look at the abstract. It is a friend of mine, Hildebrand Pincer III, talks about this. Yeah. He talks about this a lot. He's given a TED talk and other things about it. It's another one of those things where it's better to just go like that.
Yeah. You know, before we get into some, because I do want to kind of maybe reflect just a little bit on hope a little bit, and where maybe there are some bright spots in this movement forward. I think that we've had some real champions in the last few years kind of really start to push the needle. I'm not saying move the needle yet, but to push on it, right? Yeah. But before we get there, I do want to come back to a conversation we started before we started taping here about the NAEP. And I think we both share a little outrage when we look at the NAEP data. Yeah. You know, when we think about the fact that 60-some% of our kids are breeding below proficiency across our country. And there's such a large percentage of those kids who are Black and brown. And to the point where every time we've talked about the data in just about every piece of writing professionally I've done over the last 7 or 8 years. Yeah. And I'm not sure how to express my outrage any differently. Right. But you had brought up such an amazing point in this. Is really about how they define the levels, is that the NAEP has these cut scores, and you talk about where basic is, where below basic is, where proficient and where advanced is. But there's one category where there's no definition of actually what this actually means and the outcome and looks like.
Yeah, so NAEP has 4 categories. That's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. The 4 proficiency bands. They have advanced, proficient, basic, and then below basic, you could say. And for advanced, which is where everyone wants their child to be, they say it represents superior, it presumes mastery, and represents superior academic performance. They define it clearly. For proficient, solid academic performance, for the given grade level, over challenging subject matter, and application of real world situations and knowledge to that, and analytical skills appropriate for the subject. I mean, these are very clear definitions. And even basic, which you're not proficient yet, but it says partial mastery of the knowledge and skills that are fundamental for proficient work at a given grade. So basically we're saying, here are the very clear definitions, but then you have below basic, where A lot of American children are. You're
Mhm.
talking about 33%. In some districts, in some states, it's as high
Yeah.
as 60%. And we don't
Yep.
want to talk about some of these stats, but they don't even define it. They don't give the definition for that proficiency band. It's almost like we know and you know.
Mhm.
Yep.
Let's just not talk about it.
Yeah.
It is beyond the pale. They
Mhm.
can't do what they need to do. They can't any of these things we've talked about, fundamentals and grade level mastery and knowledge of real world situations and analytical skills appropriate. Like that's
Yeah.
basically being able to navigate society.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they don't even go there.
Yep.
And
I feel
it's
like we should.
Yeah.
I feel like we should give them a definition, Kareem. I feel like we should
Mm.
really focus on crafting a definition that talks about inability to access the basic tenets of society, inability to navigate, a growth trajectory as a human being, inability to pull out of a really broken. I think there's so many things we should actually push on that thing to identify and hold themselves accountable for the outcome of that.
Well,
Well,
here's the
and I think,
problem. What you just described, that's the basic category.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
you just said, that's basic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Partial mastery of knowledge and skills that are fundamental
Yeah.
in navigating society. In other words, you haven't really figured out what you need to know to navigate society and work at a given grade is
Yeah.
as a precursor to that. What's below that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Man,
And
I
yeah,
understand why they didn't want to go there, but like we can't avert our eyes, man. We have to look the truth at its square. You know,
Yeah.
the old Stockdale paradox. You got to face the brutal truth and reality of the situation so you can at least have
Yeah.
a chance of fixing it.
right. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, the gap gets larger and larger, right? I mean, we're all committed to this work, and the outrage, and when we're talking about not even basically defining it, the gap gets larger. The disparities between, when you're talking about 66% or 33%, like we're not even breaking down, Kareem, you talked about differences across geography in some states, some jurisdictions, some cities, even when you look across populations, that the bottom line is that our most vulnerable kids
Mm-hmm.
are experiencing that gap because we're not attending to that they're not getting the access. The systems change isn't there. And so, I think that's, an important thing to even think about when the data continues to show. And then, even back to what Kareem, you and the things that you highlight, the stories of these kids not getting these access continues to show. And so where do we go from here? And I think, what were some of the things you wanted to add to that?
And I think you actually touched down on a kind of a concept that I think is just, I wanted to ground this next question in, is really the Stockdale paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that, we can't be pessimistic because it crushes us. We can't be too optimistic because we get our hopes up and then we just kind of get crushed on that side. But really, the ability to confront the brutal facts of a situation and believe that in the end, we're going to prevail.
Yes.
That's right.
And so when you think about from that perspective of recognizing that we can't just have blind optimism nor turn from a pessimistic as this is not a problem we can solve, but if we confront the brutal facts of the situation here, where do you see some bright spots where we're starting to have some conversations about actually confronting the brutal facts?
Okay, put a pin in that.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back to something you all said a second ago, which was about the gap, achievement gap. And not to be a jerk, but I think it's one of the biggest misnomers in education because it's like putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
First of all, to have an achievement gap, you got to have some achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when people refer to achievement gap, they're talking about black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, I mean, it may be something different, maybe rich and poor, but usually it's black and white. I got news for people, and I know this may shock some folks. White kids are struggling too.
Mm-hmm.
Struggling. You go down to Beverly Hills, and they got 75% proficient. You go to Palo Alto, which is basically the Northern California version of
Yeah.
Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And it's 70 something percent, 72, whatever it is. And you might say 70 something, that's incredible. Really? So if I got 4 kids, one of them can't read, I'm not happy.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. And that's after applying all the resources and privilege and whatever I can do, I have done it. And now here we are at 70 something percent.
Yeah.
One of my 4 kids still is not reading. That's me. I've spent them to tutoring. I've gone to this school. I've changed schools. I've said I'm going to, talk to my lawyer, whatever. And they're still struggling.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, the real color to all this is green. Because those with the money, they're gonna pay. They're gonna find ways to support their children.
Yep.
To get, they're gonna pay for Kumon or Sylvan or some other thing, and that's expensive. That violates their rights too. You shouldn't have to come out of, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you have a lot of margin of error. People are leveraged. People are living paycheck to paycheck, even though they're making a lot of money. Now you can talk about that, it shouldn't be the case. I'm just telling you that they have a right, their children have a right to a free and appropriate public education. And this has to become like Social Security.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it, so they can't touch it. All the political nonsense and noise and drama, they're not messing with it because everybody's grandma's on Social Security. Yeah. Everybody's mom and dad might draw a check from that. And so therefore, the political might and opportunity just isn't there for them to gut it. Believe me, they want to. Yeah. But because everybody gets it. So I want everyone to understand, hopefully they hear me, through your platform. This is an everybody thing. Yeah. It's not about us liking each other. It's about us needing each other. Yeah. We need each other so that this can become an everybody thing. Because if it's not, the pendulum will swing, the waves will ride in and ride back out with the tide. Yeah. So all kids have a right to read. And that means that all systems have a duty. And everybody wants rights, but it seems like nowadays nobody wants duty. Yeah. It's these systems' duty to provide students with what they need and the educators to what they need. That means the university's not off the hook for how they prepare leaders and teachers. That means the publishers aren't off the hook for the materials they promote because they know when they got to pass the rubric at the state level, but they know good and doggone well it doesn't attend to the science, the research, doesn't have evidence of success, and cannot be used in a reasonable amount of time or prepared for. That's on the school board members, the superintendent. Let me get all. I'm getting a little hyped up here, but this is an everybody issue. Yeah. And the reality is, America has lost its everybody. Yeah. It's everybody mindset. You don't send a person to the moon unless you have an everybody mindset. That's a national movement. Yeah. You don't end civil rights. You don't end segregation unless everybody. You know what I'm saying? You don't. Yeah. There's some things that it's going to take all of us to do because it's so daunting. Yeah. This is one of those things. The question is, do we still have that in us as a country? And swear to goodness, I don't know.
That's a wonderful question.
I don't know.
Everything you just said about, the access and the impact on all folks, right? I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, middle of nowhere. Took me 35 minutes to get to a gas station spot, right?
Right.
Library in my elementary school, half filled with books, half empty. Right. Literacy challenges there abound. My cousin, who's a second grade teacher, wonderful heart, does everything she can do for the kids who are under her charge every year. Not given the materials, not given the training, doesn't quite understand how to move the needle for many of these kids. And districts are failing. So they're failing kids across the country. And I so appreciate you sort of recentering this on, because I do think when we focus on anything that feels like a section of, we miss a really big part of the picture.
That's right.
Is that this is something that I do believe raises all boats. It gives folks across all walks of life, across all backgrounds, an opportunity to access something that I believe to be really great. But I think the question is, as a country, are we able to kind of turn back to be about each other and about a collective, not about an individual?
Yeah. I know this. So I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know for sure is this: that individuals are responsible for the things within their sphere of control.
Mhm.
It
Yep.
matters how I and who I connect with.
Yeah.
It matters how I connect with people. It matters who I engage with. Like there are some people who have expressed to me that I shouldn't be talking to these white folks, or I shouldn't be talking to these progressives over here, or I
Mhm.
shouldn't be talking to these black radicals over there, or I shouldn't be talking to Moms of Liberty people here, or I shouldn't be talking. I mean, if I listen to all the people I shouldn't be talking to talking with, I'd be in the room by my doggone self.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right.
Don't how you gonna talk to the NAACP? Those old timers, they that's old days. Man, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And so I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that I'm in charge of me and my locus of control. You
Mhm.
look at the folks in Kentucky, there's a place called Goose Creek in Kentucky,
Uh-huh.
and they have completely turned around in Goose Creek. Schools have just and the Bluegrass Institute did a report
Uh-huh.
and talked about what they did and how nobody reads it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it. It's as if these kids in the foothills of Appalachia are invisible.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
as if these communities, you know, who are learning a second language are
Mhm.
invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's as if these communities in places like Oakland and Richmond and West Contra Costa and like there is the class of people who talks a lot and who's always on TV talking a
Mhm.
good game. And telling us who we should and shouldn't talk to, who we should and shouldn't work with, who we should and shouldn't listen to, and what political party to join, and all this type of stuff. Man, that's all fine. Let the show go on. The circus got to have a ringleader. But the people on the ground
Mhm.
who are
Yeah.
struggling day to day, our kids are dying. And
Yeah.
it's not a game, it's not a joke. We have to figure out how to work with each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that we agree on anything else.
Yeah.
I never asked y'all who you voting for. I never asked you what political party you're part of. I
Yeah.
didn't ask you what you believe about abortion rights. I didn't ask you what you believe about the military industrial complex. I didn't ask you what you believe about election interference. I didn't ask you about none of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not important.
Mhm.
I got my beliefs. Believe me. You could sit down, we could talk about Malcolm X and the history and what he thought about different political parties and all that. We can go back to Nat Turner and the revolution in 1832 and like, listen, I'm a Morehouse man. We can get into it.
Yeah.
But today, it's the only question I have is, are you willing to put kids first?
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And
Here, here.
if the answer to that is yes, we can actually disagree on the methods because people of good faith, when they engage, will evolve towards solutions and answers collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to have that struggle. Sometimes it's kind of messy. You know, my
Yeah.
inbox is kind of rough, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
I've had people say, Kareem, they don't want to listen to me. I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal. Like, just okay, you keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going and
Yeah.
build coalition because that's what our kids need for us to do.
Well, I love that aspect of coalition too. And I think I do want to circle back to what you were both talking about, this being an everyone problem. It's a problem of public health, right? And I almost wish that
Yes.
like when Dr. Vivek Murthy put out the epidemic of loneliness, like that we would say this is a health epidemic of illiteracy, right? That we'd continue to underscore that.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about that collective and that coalition building. And, you know, I think that at this point, you know, 40 minutes into the conversation, our readers are saying now, what do I do now, right? What have you seen, Kareem, and the things that are going to lead to change? And so from all of your leadership work and your expertise, from teaching in Oakland to being a principal to your work with the NAACP and Fulcrum, what are those things that are happening that are leading to scale change in communities? Where are those bright spots?
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to give you a resource, then I'll give you an example. So there is a podcast by Ed Trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Extraordinary Districts.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Oh,
the person who did it her name was Karen Chenoweth. She's a longtime journalist, and so she goes around the country and she looks to see districts that are breaking the mold. You know, they're beating the curve. They look at the demographics and they should be here, but they're up here, right? And rural areas, urban areas, suburban areas, like all across the country. Now, it's phenomenal. she goes through it. She talks to board members and teachers and parents and superintendents and legislators. And like, it is as good a reporting job as you could do. And it's mostly been ignored. It was 5 seasons of it, and they just took it off the air. Nobody was paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I go to these meetings and conferences, and I'll click on it to let people listen, and they'll have like 20 views after 5 years. And I can tell you, most of those views are probably me. And the people I send there. Nobody's paying attention. Now, let it be some Kardashians. Let it be some bump and grind. Thousands of views, millions of views. Come on now. So I would say go there. Matter of fact, when I hire somebody at Fulcrum, we have a very small team. I wish it could be bigger. But what we could do if we had a bigger team. But when the first thing we do, I have people study that, make diagrams and look at common things that they did successfully. And because we can't even really talk from a place of ignorance, we have to be knowledgeable in what we're saying. All right. So that's the first thing as a resource. Where is it working? Lane, Oklahoma is working. Seaford, Delaware is working. These are places where they have made decisions about curriculum, about attending to the science of reading, about professional development, and their systems and structures match their values. So you can't tell me that you believe in social justice. You have 200 minutes a week to prepare for your literacy program, or for your teachers, but you select a curriculum that takes at minimum 300 minutes a week for full implementation to plan for. That dog won't hunt. Like, it doesn't line up. In a best case scenario, you're hoping that your teachers act like the Salvation Army and just donate their time. As a system, it's got to line up, right? Our audio has to match our video. So the things we say, all kids, social justice, all that, it actually has to lead to making choices that are informed and that are aligned. So you gotta, so I'll walk you through some things. So for example, Seaford and elsewhere, you need somebody in charge of this who knows what they're doing. Usually that's not the superintendent, but there's gotta be a person who is in the cabinet. Now, I've seen it work. What was that district in New Jersey? I forget. I've seen it work a couple of places where the person in the cabinet has a person underneath them who actually does the work, and they represent the working cabinet. Okay, fine. I've seen it work. That's not what we advise in our thing, but I've seen it work. So what can I say? Right. But but in the cabinet, you got muscle. You have, when they start cutting and slicing and divvying up what gets resource allocation and time, somebody's in there waving a flag for literacy, especially early literacy. If you don't have that, the superintendent has no idea what's going on. He or she may think she does, but they don't. Once you get too far removed from them, you just hear what people want you to hear. But if you get somebody in there whose job it is to focus exclusively on literacy, they're not going to get hustled. At least they shouldn't be. Right? So you need somebody in charge with a budget, with staff, resources. If you got to get private money to fund it, get the private money. Somebody out here will give $1 to get the kids reading. That's one thing. 2, you need to identify where teachers are coming from and make sure you're getting them from aligned sources. Go to the National Council on Teacher Quality's website, look at the teacher prep reviews, and see which universities and colleges around your area, and non-traditional programs too, where are they actually training people that are in ways that are aligned to the research consensus? Most of them are not. So if you are getting people from a university or a college who have been trained in balanced literacy, guided reading, you got your Fonda Pinel, you got your like just all this stuff, this failure industrial complex, all this stuff steeped in it. You're going to have to train them to stop doing that stuff first before you can even teach them what to do. You don't have money or time for that. Frankly. So you got to get that together. You have leverage. You can go to them and say, this is what we're doing. We're going to prioritize universities that are aligned. Here's that. The next thing you do is you need a good curriculum. You got to have something that has evidence of success. Going to ed reports alone is not enough. Matter of fact, I've been pushing on this a little bit behind the scenes. Ed reports is a trusted entity. They have done great work in the field. They have kind of pushed out some of the bad actors because they weren't aligned to the standards, but they don't consider student achievement in any way in their scoring. And people don't know that. They just say, oh, green, great, green. I want green. Man, these publishers are not dumb. They have teams that are designed to help them get green. So what they do is they throw everything in the kit to satisfy every rubric, and they'll get green. You have to have something that's usable and aligned. In other words, it has evidence of results, right? It works. The stuff's got to prove to work. Kids aren't guinea pigs. It's got to work, and it has to be able to be fully implemented within the bounds of the teacher's contract if it's a unionized district. So it's like being a chef. You don't start cooking a meal that takes 3 hours to prepare and you only have 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Yeah. And then complain when the food is nasty.
Yeah.
Right. So our teachers are cooking Thanksgiving dinner every day. And the time to prep has to line up with what the structure is, unless we're just saying we're just hoping. And hope is not a strategy.
It is not.
Yeah.
There are some other things. You got to have a safety net. So while people go through the seasons of learning, because you got to have professional development, not just curriculum-based professional development, the folks in CFR will tell you, like they went through this professional development cycle. It was thorough. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
All these districts have money. They had money for the COVID funds. Some of that money should have gone for professional development. But while they're doing that, what about the kids? While everyone's learning what to do, while the universities are getting it together and the schools are getting it together and the curriculum's getting figured out, what about the kids? And I would say one of the things that you got to figure out is what's the safety net to catch kids in the meantime, in between time. And those safety nets should have evidence of results. I look at one called Ignite Reading. Phenomenal. Phenomenal. 15 minutes a day, virtual tutors, 100% attendance on the tutor's part. People are trained in the science of reading, and it's virtual and it's monitored, so you can roll the tape back. And the progress is across all subgroups. Now, it's not cheap, but it works. And we got to figure out that we can't do this on the discount. So I'm gonna give them a plug. They're a good one. But there are others, but you got to find some program, something to take a little bit of the pressure off of teachers while they figure this out.
Yeah.
So those are some things. There are more, but in terms of the doing, and if I'm an individual teacher, I need professional development, and I need to demand. So what are our instructional norms and expectations at our school site? What is the leadership's responsibility for providing quality feedback on a consistent basis? When I was a principal, it wasn't magic. I was in every classroom every day and I gave them feedback. That means for the first month, I had a trail of kids who came with me because they were used to sending kids to the office for trouble. My thing was, you keep doing that, they're going to be right behind me as I visit everybody's classroom, because this is the North Star. Yeah. And after a while, they're like, I'm not sending kids to Weaver because I don't want my business in the street. They're going to be in everybody else's class and they're going to be talking about me. Why is Julio always with Mr. Weaver? You know what I mean? So you have to make up your mind what the priority is and go get it. And make a conscious effort to grow people's practice. Because I got news for you. You can't hire and fire your way out of this. There are enough teachers as there are. You got to grow people. And if you can't grow people, you need training and development, or it's not your season. Find somebody else to get in the chair. But we need instructional leaders now and not just managers. It's the only way we're going to get through this.
I love that.
I've been taking copious notes here, Kareem.
You asked the question.
I don't even know where to start. Like, I'm just like, I'm so energized and excited by this. I think one of the things one of the big pieces here I'll focus on here is the idea that teachers do not come out of university programs equipped.
That's right.
This is my 22nd year in education. It's like 16th year in leadership. I was a principal for 7 years of a program. I've been a head of school now for the last 10. And I have to tell you, I've interviewed a lot of teachers.
Yeah.
And I think you are 100% correct. It's about growing the people you have.
Right.
One of the things that we do here, and we actually do this, we do training out externally too, but we spend 2 years before we ever let teachers kind of, have a classroom of their own. So we have an extreme version of a model here, right? That I would love to say is feasible for the entire world, but we know it's not, as in many ways. But we spent 2 years getting teachers ready to be able to be in front of kids. We train them on how to set a good lesson, how to use good language, how to think about their outcomes, how to think about all the things that are aligned with the science and reading, bringing research to practice in the classroom. We've been doing some work with, we had these 4 moms who'd come through our program who spent the DOE in the New York City, DOE, the Department of Education, opened up a call for schools. So you could put a paper in for, I wanted a STEM school to focus on this, or a French immersion school.
Yeah.
And our 4 moms coming out of our program were like, the DOE needs to focus on literacy. So we've been doing all this professional development, helping them get up to speed. And now they have a PS number. They have a building leader. They have several home rooms that they're working with. They're adding grade levels every year. We just did another pilot for a school that's going to open up in Brooklyn next year. But this is literally one of the poorest zip codes in the country.
It's the Literacy Academy Collective, if you're not familiar with it.
South Bronx.
I wrote a letter to them to get some funding. I'm on the advisory board of that group.
So I'm on their board as well. So, but like it is like there are some good things happening, but I think training. I loved how you talked about creating a safety net, kind of a little pressures off teachers while they learn. I think creating, instructional leaders and having principals see themselves as truly instructional leaders in this place and challenging those status quos. Like I feel like you and I could sit down over a drink and talk about this for hours. So just really get excited about this.
Well, let me just say one quick thing before I got to jump in quickly. So,
please.
If you're a principal or a hiring committee member, so here's a challenge. You need teachers. But many of the schools, many of the universities aren't preparing people to come in and hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So I, as a principal, was very intentional. I knew this. It's not a big secret, right? And it's not about them being a new teacher. They just don't know. They just haven't been taught. And so what I did was, and I would encourage everyone to do, you have to recruit not just for the skill, but also character. I was looking for personality traits. I was looking for my best hires. I'm looking for endurance. I'm looking for ability to stand when it's popular, not to kind of go along and get along. I'm looking for endurance. I remember one of my best hires was a young woman who she was going to teach 3rd grade, brand new teacher, but I hired her because when she was in college, she was a swimmer. Swimmers, that's a lot of commitment. A lot of commitment from parents and families to do those type of things. And she ended up leaving her swim team after her sophomore year.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, how did you make that decision? And what did you do when you did it? And she told me, listen, I brought my coach in, I brought my team together. I told them where I was at. I loved the experience. I finished out my season, but then it was time for me to transition. And I said, that's character. To be clear about your values and your needs, and to handle it with maturity, dignity, and grace, and not run from it, and to be willing to go against the grain when the pressure's going this way, to go, because parents invest a lot when kids play these sports and do this stuff. To be able to tell your family. So how'd you tell your family? She told her family, sat them down and told them, like, I'm hiring her. She was one of the best hires I made because she had the character of someone who could persevere and not just go along with the crowd. And so when you're in a hiring situation, ideally you have aligned staff from day one. But oftentimes it's not possible. So you better go find some people with character that are willing to grow and that have the foundation character-wise to grow in a way that is decent, honorable, and they have integrity with their work.
I think too, when you talked about the character piece, and the last piece is the humility, right? The willingness to learn, the openness to learn. I always talk about this on the podcast, The Rise by Sarah Lewis. And she talks about this concept of mastery being this lifelong, continuous pursuit. It's not linear. I mean, these are things obviously we talk about, but to be in teachers, to be in a career of mastery, and you're looking for those people that are willing to learn, and you're looking for those leaders that are willing to learn as well. The last thing I'll say about professional development too, and some of the pieces you were talking about, is ensuring that it creates that this agency for teachers that beyond the curriculum, when you talked about non-curriculum professional development, that it's applicable, that they know what they can do the next day in their classroom to ultimately support their students. They have the agency and the belief, and we know they have the hunger, right? But they have the agency and the beliefs to do the things they know and the change that they can make in their kids. So I really liked how you talked about that too, because it's one way that we always frame our professional development work at the Institute, especially with some of our external folks we work with, is just, how are we creating opportunities and experiences for teachers to see themselves in the work, create that agency, and make it applicable then for their classrooms. So I love that. Co-host here.
Yeah.
We only have a few more minutes with Kareem Weaver. So
Yeah.
do you have any final questions for Kareem before we, thank him for his time?
I have so many, but I feel like if I
listen, we got a little more
say,
time. Don't rush me off. We got a little bit more time. We started late.
I want all day. Yeah.
Well, listen. One thing I will say while you're thinking of that question, there's a network, charter school network, in the Ohio area, and a friend of mine, Jen Heyman, leads the professional development for this network, and the intentionality with which she applies the learning experiences, the science of reading, and getting people on board, not just programmatically, but culturally.
Yep.
To understand this is a shift that all of us have to do it. Like, you need that type of leader.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I'm a superintendent, I'm looking for that person. I'm hiring that person. I'm stealing them. Like, I'm looking at Columbus, Ohio, and I'm saying, where's she at? Where's this Jen Heyman person? I'm hiring her.
Yeah.
Like, and those people exist all around the country. They're working in isolation, but you need people who can construct purposefully learning experiences that will edify the staff and actually build their practice. There is nothing worse than bad professional development. It is the life suck of teachers' existence. You got to have
100%.
it be on time, quality, engaging. People come in, whatever this thing, it's got to be good, because if it's not, you can burn through whatever goodwill there is from that.
Yep.
I feel like if we had a live studio audience right now, that would have got a standing ovation right there. I'm just
teachers, educators know.
Yeah, I'm like, yes,
Man,
yes.
After a hard day's work, and you come in, sit down, and you got all this stuff to do, and they're in there, oh my gosh, and they're droning on.
Yeah.
And you have to stay there, and it's not just that it's bad, it's opportunity cost. It's what else could I be doing with this time? I only have so much time.
Yeah.
What else could I be doing? And this is the best they could do. It shows a lack of respect that's what you provided me.
Couldn't agree more.
Or a lack of knowledge that you thought this was actually worth my time.
Yeah.
It's a thing in education. If you know, you know.
Yeah. I would love to figure out if you have maybe after the podcast the charter school network. I would, because I worked in Ohio in Cincinnati and in Columbus for a while. Huh?
I will tell you before we get off. I'll have it for you.
Yeah. Because I love when we get a chance to connect with folks doing some really great work. I think there are some universities who are trying to turn the needle a little bit and move things in a more positive direction. I know in Cincinnati we have Mount St. Joe, who I know is really pushing in big ways to be very aligned in their teacher training practices, and we hired a lot. But I just really appreciate the structure to the hiring process and the clarity with which you sort of articulated what you're looking for in educators. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things we've tried so hard to do as we work to kind of bring folks into the community, because this work is rocket science, right? You need to have a level of technical proficiency, but you also have to have, I think, some real internal resilience. You have to have that ability to endure and persist. You have to be able to understand that this is not about you. This is about the kids you're serving in your classroom. This will never be about you as a human. This is about the children and families you're serving. And I think finding folks who are aligned in that space, who could show up and really kind of amplify that from a school perspective, that's where you start to get some of these really big gains. And I'm thinking of our conversation with Kristen Wynn, one of the first episodes we did of this, really kind of highlighting some of that work down in Mississippi. Like, there's just so many, like, I think, connections between several of the episodes that we've done on this particular edition of Read. So, yeah, I'm like sitting here like spinning with excitement right now.
Yeah.
So that network was a charter school specialist network, and Jen Heyman is the director of literacy development. I just Googled it.
Okay.
So she's in charge of professional development and all that. And they've had some conferences. I've gone out there a couple of times, and really, I mean, I get asked to do things all the time, but I was just impressed by the intentionality with which they organize things. They also had some folks that I know from just education circles also come out. And I was like, if they're bringing that person, then I know that they're about it, so.
Yeah.
And just how you construct the learning experience also tells people how important this is to you.
Yeah.
Or are you just making stuff up and doing it on the fly? People can call BS. They know when something is legit and when it's really intentional, as opposed to you just slapping it together with, duct tape. And so she did a really great job with that. There are networks around the country who this is their biggest gap.
Yeah.
How they construct the learning experiences for people, because it lets people know how serious you are about it. And I will say, in terms of professional development, this is one of those 8 actions that we said are critical for people who are trying to move forward with literacy. You have to message what you're trying to do and the details of it consistently over time. And it's not just from the bully pulpit of the superintendent's or the CEO's office. It's the professional development team. It's your coaches. It's your principals and assistant principals. It's your cabinet. Everyone has to be singing. You don't have to be singing the same tune, but at least, it could be a different octave, but everybody's aligned. They're marching in the same direction. And the professional development actually is a sign of your seriousness and your commitment.
Yep.
Who's in charge of that?
Yep.
Yeah.
How good are the professional learning experiences?
Yep.
That tells me whether or not I should take this seriously or I should just close my door and teach because this will go away with the next initiative.
Yeah.
So who's in charge of professional development? And that really should come out of that person I said is in the cabinet level role for leading the literacy work. That person should either it is that person or they're working hand in glove with them.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a charter network. Like the charter school specialists, that's a network of many schools and many organizations. But sometimes it's a small district. Okay, well, somebody's got to hold it and make sure that the learning experiences that people get are worthy of their time and worthy of the seriousness of this issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're speaking my language. I think about, we had such a beautiful opportunity to spend time with schools and districts with customized learning opportunities. And one of the things that energizes our team is when just like you said, you have those leaders across many different levels of the organization, from the cabinet to the building leader, to those really energized teachers that are class leaders or grade level leaders, team leaders, curriculum leaders, and they see themselves in the work and they're willing to continue to push that commitment internally after our relationship has ended. And, we spend a lot of times with these schools, right, throughout sustained learning opportunities. But what we see and the excitement that we get, and that is when those schools and those leaders really take that work and they continue to push that value, and you see that shared collaboration and that shared commitment, again, back to collective, back to coalition building, all those pieces really make that professional learning valuable. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Well, it also, let me just say, so I mentioned the charter school specialist group. So I don't get into the charter and district argument. I don't have, kids can't read, but they're not like a management company.
Right.
They're an authorizer.
Mm-hmm.
So I mention that because from different vantage, everybody's responsible. If you're authorizing somebody to go teach kids, you better make sure they're actually teaching kids and that their folks are in position to do it successfully. Otherwise, you have no business authorizing them.
Yeah.
If you're a school district and you have it's not necessarily about the governance model. It's not necessarily, like, we can go down that rabbit hole too. And I can tell you, the American Federation of Teachers, they've been saying this for 25 years. So, but we get so caught up in union, non-union, the tribal stuff, that we realize this is an everybody thing.
Yeah.
Whether you're a district or charter or Catholic school or religious school, whatever, kids still got to learn to read. I don't want any kids to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want the public system to be strong. I've got my lens on that, but wherever kids are, it's got to work. So whoever is in charge, and I would just say the most in-demand people around the country ought to be people who are in charge of this literacy stuff, and it's working. So I mentioned Jen, but it could be her. I'd be Googling her.
Yeah.
I'd go down to Seaford, Delaware and find, because when I went to Seaford, Delaware and brought people, the former lead of this, Kelly Carvalho Hagman, she now works at Milford, the district. So they hired her away. Good on them. That's what you should do. These people ought to be in demand. I appreciate the quarterback of the football team. I understand that the NBA has a draft. Listen, if we can get somebody in charge of the literacy program that knows what they're doing and who's good at it, and who can run good professional development and who can help lead this at the state level or at the district level or the central office level, that ought to be like, go find the money to fund and bring that person, go recruit them.
Yeah.
I want them in Oakland.
Yeah.
I let it be known. We want your people. We want your best people here in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
Unified, charter, all of them. We want them here because they're serving our kids. They ought to be the most in-demand people in the country.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll get off that, but that's just one example. That network is just one example of how you got to be intentional, and you got to have the right people in charge of literacy development for your network.
Ooh.
Could not have said that better. Like, I just, this conversation for me has been like equal parts, like inspirational, equal parts, motivating in terms of like, how do I continue to push some of this work forward? It's also helped. I want to go lay on the floor and just reflect on this for a few days, days, not hours, like days. Mm-hmm. But I just can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today. I think your vision, your passion, the energy that you bring, I think the love that you bring to education and the focus that you have on kids is truly inspirational. And I'm just so glad you are such a force for good for our kids and families across this country. So thank you for that. I don't know if we had, because we're normally, when we kind of finish these conversations, we ask some fun questions. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, you have laid a layer of inspiration on what I myself, and I'm assuming here, Danielle, but where do you draw some inspiration from in your work?
Marva Collins, the Bible, different sacred books. Like I like to read religious texts, and you can go almost across any religion and you're going to find something in there on literacy.
Yeah.
In the Quran, the Analects of Confucius, the Bible, Old and New Testament, they talk about reading and the word. And I draw inspiration from that. I look at people like Marva Collins, who, Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. asked her to be their Secretary of Education. She said no. I wish she said yes. But, all this stuff we're talking about, the science reading stuff, this is just what Marva Collins was doing.
Yeah.
Google, go watch the movie, the Marva Collins story with Morgan Freeman and Cicely Tyson. This is what she was doing. We can call it the science of reading now, that's fine. But she was taking the kids nobody wanted, nobody knew how to deal with, and she was teaching those babies to read, and they were excelling at extreme levels. Yeah. And I remember CBS, it was a 60 Minutes, tracked those students, and they found when they were adults, they're doing all these wonderful and amazing things. And it was like, it was easy after we got out of her class. Right. She wasn't afraid of rigor.
Yeah.
Love is rigor. Love is a lesson plan. Love is preparation. Love is quality curriculum. Love is formative feedback. Like we glamorize the profession or romanticize it. So we think, oh, we love the babies. They're so cute. These teachers are so cute. Let me tell you something. These teachers are working their tails off. They're professionals. If it was me, if it was my money, it's not my money, but if it was my money, I would get some of these private groups, and I'd say, listen, we are going to have an NIL fund, name, image, and likeness, and we're going to recruit the top kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers in America to our city, and we're going and they're going to draw an NIL deal, and they're going to get double their salary. Half is going to come from us. They're going to get this NIL money. We're going to recruit the best. What would the impact be in your city if you had a kindergarten and first grade, the ranks of like the best in the country in your city for 5 years, for 7 years, 7 years? What would that do to the city, the economy, the culture, the climate, the standard of living, the environment? Yeah. Marriages would get saved off that. Because I can tell you one of the main things that parents argue about is the kids and what's going on with them. The stress. I mean, I'm working 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours and I come home and the kids can't read. What the heck is going on? Yeah. Right? Like that's real. The impact would ripple. What would the homelessness look like after a while? And what's that worth?
Yeah.
So that's what we need, a collective, all these people who have this foundation money, look, get a collective together in the city of whatever, small town USA, and you recruit the best K1, 2 teachers you can, and you give them a housing allowance, and you give them this, and you treat them, forget about Deion Sanders in Colorado or whoever the popular football. Listen, that first grade teacher who knows how to teach the science of reading and get kids to read, even the most vulnerable kids, listen, we got to have them. We're going to recruit them 5 stars. We're going to recruit them and we're going to keep them. We're going to treat them great. Like, I'm not playing. Like, we got to make sure.
What an amazing world that would look like.
Yeah.
That would be just like, again, such an incredible world if we could live in it, we could get to that.
And don't tell me we don't have the money.
Yeah.
Because we're sending money overseas to blow people up all the time.
Yeah.
Hello, somebody. To all these different wars and conflicts. We spending money. We printing money all the time.
Yeah.
Don't tell me we don't have money to pay teachers. Yeah. And that's national. Yeah. I'm talking about local people, local foundations and charity organizations coming together and saying, this is a priority. We want to fund it.
Yep.
If, for example, you're using a curriculum that doesn't work and you're telling me that you don't have the money to get a new one because you do a 5-year adoption cycle and all that. No. We're not going to keep doing something that doesn't work because we don't have the money. Here's the money. Figure out what works best for kids and do it today. Stat.
And we have the teachers who are hungry. So lift up those people, those professionals that want to continue to help kids. Yeah. I love that.
And there's also education departments have a role to play.
Yeah.
So if I'm a teacher and I need professional development, I mean, I should have got trained in my university, but whatever. I need PD and I need it now. I ought to be able to go to the State Department of Education, type in my code for my credential, and they'll pay for it. Mm-hmm. Like, what am I supposed to do? Pay for it out of my own pocket? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, come on now. People have. So there's some things that we can do at the system level and community level, in partnership with groups like the NAACP and the Urban League and whatever group you want to name. Because this is an all of us issue, and it's going to take all of us, public and private sector, and the universities, to get this going in the right direction.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I loved ending with that tangible, what can we do now across the system? I echo what Jamie talked about, Kareem. Thank you for these insights. Thank you for this inspiration. Thank you for just moving this conversation and the action forward.
Yeah.
And thank you for being on this episode of the Read Podcast. It's such a joy to have you here today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Jamie and I are going to be reflecting about that conversation with Kareem Weaver for days. We hope that you had a lot of different takeaways that we have. We know that we are ready to move forward and to charge and be inspired, just as Kareem had shared. We thank you, readers, for listening to this episode to Lead on Read. To learn more about this episode or from past Read guests, you can visit readpodcast.org. If you are just as inspired from this episode as we are, I invite you to check out further learning opportunities, resources, and articles at thewindwardschool.org/WI. Stay engaged with us during Dyslexia Awareness Month and throughout this year by also connecting with us on social media and signing up for the Windward Institute's newsletters to learn more about upcoming professional development opportunities, resources, and events. Finally, if you have any ideas of topics and speakers or leaders in the field that are igniting and scaling change, you can reach out to me via email at info@readpodcast.org. And with that, keep leading, readers. Until next time, readers.